162 participants. Wow.
Yeah, that's okay. I guess we have started. Um, students, I guess y'all are getting a little bit of free entertainment here because we're not really supposed to start until 6, and I don't know, the button must have been clicked at some
Okay.
point in time. So I guess we're live. And
Okay.
students are hearing our banter and seeing our banter. So students, as I said, we're not really going to get started until 6. I guess do I want to kick y'all out and let y'all come back in? Nah,
That's a lot of people.
that's too much
177.
work.
Oh, yeah.
That's too much work. So
Would you like me
just
to just have some native music playing or something?
oh, that would be awesome, dear.
Okay.
That's fine.
Let-
Just one thing I want to say. So we're going to
Okay.
really officially get started at 6.
Okay.
I have a little spiel that I give,
Sure.
takes about a minute or so, and then probably talk until about 6:45 if your content gets you that
Sure.
far.
Yeah, that's fine.
We usually have a hard stop at 7
Yeah, no problem with
to
me.
get folks out of here. So
Okay.
so yeah, let's listen to some of your some Native
Okay.
American
I'll
music
I'll
for the next
play
6 minutes, and
so
we'll get going at 6.
let me pull it up.
Lovely.
Clement, and then or Clement, Dr.
That
Clement. I
that's
now I'm gonna have that stuck in my head
Yep, I
that I
understand
thought,
that.
oh
They
no,
put
I've been mispronouncing this all,
uh,
all this time. All right, I'm not sharing at the moment, so I'm coming over to
yep,
my screen and I need to do an escape so that I can get to the music. And this, is it okay if it's some really upbeat music?
doesn't matter to me. It's
Okay.
fine. It's
Okay.
almost 6 o'clock, so I think we might need in some upbeat
Okay.
stuff.
Okay. Very good. And if you want, I can send the link to you,
That
Damien, so
would
that
that would be awesome.
you can
That
play.
would be
Okay.
awesome.
Okay. And this is just a couple minutes long.
Okay,
I
that's fine.
will, so Damien, will you be monitoring questions that are placed into the chat?
We typically would do the questions at the end. So at the end, I would read the questions and you would answer and
Okay.
stuff like that. So, yep.
All right. So I'm going to give this link to you. It's a YouTube video.
Yep.
And it's just probably just enough to get us started. It's some hoop dancers dancing to a band called a tribe called Red.
Okay.
And it's what I like to say about this is it kind of gets the juices going because it's a very lively video of people doing a traditional style dance, but to modern music. And it's kind of a nice way to demonstrate that Indigenous peoples connect their contemporary music, art, and lifestyles to traditions that are important to them. So I will just leave that with you. Did you get the link?
Yes, I got the link and I am about to, how do I'm going to
I'll turn my
share.
mic off, okay?
Yep,
For
I
now.
got to share my screen and do all that sort of fun stuff. And we can, oh, um, hold on. Oh, what did I do? Oh, where did it go? Okay, there it is. And if I do this, share screen two, maybe, share some. Let's see here. thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. That was pretty impressive there. And that brings us right up to our time. So hello for all those who've been here early. Welcome. We are going to get started in about 2 minutes. We give people some time to filter on in, and then we will go ahead and get started. Whoa. Oh, I guess I should have closed that. I did not. Now it's closed.
That's okay. Dr. Clement, I was going to share the link to that music with the group. If you want to,
Yeah,
you
I
can.
can definitely do that.
I had started to type it, and then I realized I guess I'm not authorized to communicate with the group.
I can share it.
Okay.
Everyone.
There we go. I just gave you a message if you
Wow.
want to use that. You may, or maybe you've already done it.
Yeah, I just sent it out. Is this a different one or same one? Oh
No,
no, this is the
same
same
one.
one.
I just
Yeah,
explained a little bit about it. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, from Canada, cool. I was wondering where they were, where it was taking place, I guess. All right, folks, it's 6:02, so let's go ahead and get started here. So hello and welcome to this evening's Zoom webinar that is being produced by the Honors College at West Virginia University. This event is the 5th Honoring Diversity lecture taking place this fall semester. These lectures are designed to expose students to a wide variety of content and information that they may not necessarily get in their academic courses here at West Virginia University. I am Damian Clement, Associate Dean of the Honors College here at West Virginia University. Tonight's lecture is entitled Becoming an Ally for Native American Justice by Bonnie Brown, Program Coordinator and Teaching Assistant Professor in the Eberly College of Arts and Sciences here at WVU. We will follow our standard Zoom webinar format for this evening. After the presentation, we will host an open question and answer session. Since we're using the Zoom webinar platform for this lecture, before we begin, let me review some of the features that will help you experience this evening's lecture in the best way possible. If you're having issues with audio or volume at any point during the webinar, be sure to check your personal Zoom settings and your computer's volume control. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Due to enhanced security protocols, webinar attendees will not be able to see other questions, only their own. To ask a question, you must click on the Q&A button. A separate screen will appear. Then you may type your question. The presenter will answer all your questions live at the end of the presentation. If live captioning has been requested, it can be viewed by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. If live captioning was not requested, a captioned version of this recording will be available at honors.wvu.edu. And now let's get started with this evening's lecture. So it is my honor to hand over the mic and the proverbial screen to Bonnie Brown. So Bonnie, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Clement. I really appreciate the invitation to present, and I'm going to get started here. I have a slideshow that I'd like to share, and so really happy to be here. And again, thank you for the invitation to be one of the speakers in the Honoring Diversity series. And I see that we have 542 participants as of this moment, so welcome to everyone. I primarily geared my presentation to WVU students, although I know there probably are faculty, staff, and community members perhaps who are also logged on. So welcome to all of you. One thing I want to point out is sometimes you will see this emblem, this iconic emblem that is associated with the Native American Studies program. I put that on the first slide of my PowerPoint for tonight. And this is This is a emblematic of a medicine wheel, which is a traditional, connected to many traditional indigenous beliefs about the four cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west, and then the three additional directions of above, below, and within. And it is sometimes used in teachings. It's often used in teachings about seeking balance, being aware of your place, trying to be centered in your life, and so on. And this one was designed by the late Professor Urban Couch, who is the former chair of the Division of Art here at WVU, and we're happy to include it. I also think a good lesson in thinking about how to become an ally for justice for Native Americans is to always acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Anywhere that you are in the Western Hemisphere, you can think of that as Indigenous land. So the Americas we think of as beginning to be colonized around 500 years ago after the landing of Columbus and so on. But certainly there were other people who came to these lands, Vikings and Basque fishermen and other people. But the change came about as people decided to come and stay and try to conquer the indigenous peoples who lived here. This photo that I'm showing you on this slide was taken by the spouse of one of our graduates. This is by Danny Hoover, and this is on top of Spruce Knob, which is the highest point in West Virginia. So I want to begin with just an abbreviated land acknowledgement, which is one step toward creating justice, to acknowledge that where we are is on Indigenous land and that Native people were here first. And we are here, all of us are here now, Native and non-Native alike. WVU, with its statewide institutional presence, resides on the ancestral lands of the Shawnee, Lenape, also called Delaware, the Haudenosaunee, also called Iroquois, which includes the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, and Tuscarora nations, the Cherokee, and other indigenous peoples. This phrase, Mitaki Oyasi, really translates from the Lakota language as all my relations. And this is a good, there are a lot of good lessons, I think, behind this. It's a belief system, a worldview, a philosophy. It's part of a spiritual belief system that we are all related. All of us human beings are sometimes called the two-leggeds. We are related to the four-leggeds, to the trees, to the fish, to the winged nation, to all of creation. We are not separate from it. So beginning an important presentation, a letter, a proclamation or something, people who use this term may use it as the first words, Mitaki Oyasi, all my relations. And I usually express this to my students at the beginning of a semester when we're starting our classes, just to indicate that I look upon them as my relatives. They could be my nieces and nephews. I care about them. I don't think I'm better than them or more important than them, but we are all part of creation, and I greet them as relatives. So it reflects this traditional core belief that all living things in all of creation are connected as relatives, not just human beings to human beings, but to all of creation. And there are other terms like this from other indigenous languages as well. This is the one I'm most familiar with, and I learned it from a Lakota friend when I was teaching at the University of South Dakota many years ago. So tonight's talk, what does it mean to be an ally? Now, for some of you, when you hear the word ally or allies, I think that what might come to mind is allies during wartime. These allies, these nations were allied against those nations. The allied forces were making progress. We just had here in the United States Veterans Day yesterday. So sometimes there is talk about those soldiers who were part of the Allied forces from one country or another, and perhaps how they contributed to bringing about the end of a war. So when we think about ally in terms of creating justice for people who have been historically oppressed and marginalized, we don't want to think about war, but we want to think about, I think, friendship, relationships, think about standing with people who need the support of others to accomplish their goals. In the United States, the American Indian and Alaska Native population, as it's termed by the U.S. Census Bureau, is a very small fraction of the total U.S. population. It is, according to census records, it's only about maybe 3% of the population, somewhere between 2 and 3%. And so when we think about the number of people who are available to get behind these important causes that Indigenous Americans are hoping to make progress on, they need the help of other people. They don't need other people who want to come in, grab the microphone, speak for them, decide what's important. But what they need are people to walk behind them, to support their leadership, and to increase advocacy. And so that's what it means, in my view, as I'll explain it to you tonight, to be an ally of Indigenous people. So accepting responsibility to become an ally means that you need to be informed. You don't want to hear one person's story and charge out with, the heart of a zealot and decide you're going to take one side over another. You need to be informed. You need to read the background. You need to talk to many people. You need to understand where your advocacy can be best placed. And those are some of the things that I'll touch on this evening. It means listening to the stories and the perspectives of others who are working, I hate to use a military term, but at the front lines or on the front end of a movement, let's say, or an initiative or some undertaking that is meant to bring about progress and to further justice for the population of concern. And in this case, Native Americans or Indigenous people. And it means supporting justice-oriented causes in the best sense of the word, to be an ally. If we start broadly, Indigenous people exist all around the world. And so the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was passed at the UN, ratified by many nations, dozens, if not hundreds of nations around the world. But unfortunately, the US, Canada, Australia, and I believe New Zealand were the last nations to ratify. In fact, the US was the very last nation to ratify and did so then only in an aspirational way. And this was just in recent years. It's not legally binding to have ratified what's called UNDRIP, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But it does mean that there's an acknowledgement that Indigenous peoples' rights have been threatened in some cases, and in some parts of the world, nearly those rights have been nearly destroyed. And those rights have to do with the kinds of human rights that we think, most of us think all people should be entitled to. Things like safety from violence, access to clean water, to healthy food, to safe housing, to freedom from environmental destruction, to freedom to worship as one pleases, freedom to speak one's Indigenous language, okay? All of those kinds of basic things and more are spelled out in the UNDRIP proclamation. I have lots of little booklets here that I pick up from time to time that are sort of the condensed version of the UNDRIP, but I encourage you to go online and take a look at it. Now, Walter Echo Hawk, who's from Pawnee Nation, wrote the book In the Light of Justice, The Rise of Human Rights in Native America. And Mr. Echo Hawk is a renowned Native American attorney. He worked for the Native American Rights Fund for many years, and he was our elder in residence in about 2012, I believe. So he gave two major lectures here at WVU, one in the law school and then one in the Mountain Laird Ballroom. And these were both open to the public. It was a good chance for people to hear from a very distinguished Native American author, legal expert, and so on. So I put this link here, and I'll click open a few links. Well, hopefully I won't hit a bunch of commercials and so on. But here is a video that you can click on, and you can hear Walter Echo Hawk discussing both of his books, but primarily in this case, In the Light of Justice. He's a very engaging speaker. His other book, which is In the Courts of the Conqueror, the 10 Worst Indian Law Cases Ever Decided, is a really important book and one that I use in my classes and that I built a class around several years ago and was able to team teach with Mr. Echo Hawk. And just to tell you how good the book is, my students told me in that class, I'm not selling my textbook. I love this book. It's very engaging, and it really spells out from one legal case to the next how the US, through Supreme Court decisions and legislation and so on, tried to really eliminate all rights for Native people, seize the land, and dictate everything that Native people were supposed to do. So we'll come back here to our PowerPoint. Just to also give you kind of, to add to your broader understanding, numerous Indigenous cultural beliefs and practices have influenced communal, collective, okay, and individual interactions with themselves, with others, and with the natural environment for millennia. And to just help you get understand the scope a little bit, that Native people have been here in the Americas for approximately 30,000 years or more, according to the scientific record. According to Native people and their own telling of their history, they have been present in the land since time immemorial, meaning beyond the earliest point at which humans can remember. In terms of the size of the Indigenous population, the upper estimates of the size of the Indigenous populations in the Americas is around 100 million. There's more agreement with a smaller number of around 30 million, but some scholars say no, that's been vastly underestimated. So just kind of wrap your head around that, because very often myths have been perpetuated in public school education and in books written by people writing from a Western European trained perspective, and diminishing and minimizing the population of Indigenous people and the length of their presence in the land. And perhaps that's conscious or unconscious, and a way to create forgiveness maybe for colonization. Indigenous peoples of the Americas are not a monolithic culture, and one indication of that is estimates are there were probably about 1,000 diverse languages spoken in the Western Hemisphere pre-European contact. And I only use pre-European contact as my time marker there, because after European contact, when some tribes were nearly decimated, if not totally decimated, by disease, by warfare, and other forms of violence, Native people all over the hemisphere were speaking their languages. And some of those languages disappeared over time with things like forced education at Indian boarding schools where English only was allowed, and other things that we'll talk about. There are varying spiritual beliefs, agricultural practices, models of sustainability, and so on. There's no one size fits all when we talk about the history of Indigenous people and the vast presence of Indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. So it would be a mistake to think after one lecture or reading one book that you got it all down. It's very, very complex. And if you want to use as an analogy, you could go to any country, any continent on Earth, and if you were to just visit one country on that continent and think everyone on the continent is like that, speaks the same language, dresses the same, eats the same food, and so on, you would be making a similar mistake if you were to apply that logic here in the Western Hemisphere. And other indications are there were many highly developed societal structures, scientific understandings, including physics, engineering, medicine, nutrition, throughout the land, including here in West Virginia and next door in Ohio. There are earthworks that are human-constructed earthworks that go back 2,000 to 3,000 years. One of those in Ohio is a lunar observatory that marks the 18.6-year-long cycle of the moon. Also at Newark, the indigenous engineers and mathematicians who designed that Earth complex, which is about 5 square miles of earthen structures, were able to square the circle. They had that understanding of geometry that long predates some other scholars around the world from understanding how to do that. Today in the United States, there are 574 federally recognized sovereign Native nations in the U.S. They have designated tribal government offices that are devoted to important concerns. I copied a photo of the Seneca Nation seal. They're considered the keeper of the Western Door for the Haudenosaunee, or as you may know them, the Iroquois Confederacy. And they are about 5.5 hours north of here at Salamanca, New York. That's the headquarters for the Seneca Nation of Indians. There's another Seneca tribe up closer to Buffalo, New York. Their original territory extended way down here into West Virginia, into what is now considered Morgantown, and so on. So I just included that because I wanted you to think about the fact that this particular nation of people, the Seneca, have been around, their nation has been around over 1,000 years. So some of the things that I'm going to move this a little bit. There we go. That Native nations today are focused upon within the departments within their own government offices. And again, these are sovereign Native nations. They have a government-to-government relationships with the federal government in the United States. And many of them have compact agreements that they have worked out with states. States do not have authority over tribes. As the Constitution is written, only the federal government and only Congress can regulate, for example, trade with foreign nations, with the states, and with the Indian tribes. So the sovereignty of the Native nations in the United States is spelled out in the U.S. Constitution. So they have offices within their government. Most of them do. Some that are very small may have kind of a condensed version of these, but offices for cultural preservation, including language preservation and revitalization if it's needed, economic development, emergency preparedness, their own sort of tribal FEMA offices, if you will. Climate change, law enforcement, and citizen safety, including anti-human trafficking efforts that they're carrying out. Intellectual property rights are a concern of modern-day Native nations, food sovereignty and sustainability, and so on. So I'm listing these as just a sampling of the kinds of offices that Native nations have today, so that you understand they are modern Native nations who face all the same modern concerns that states, cities, counties, and the federal government face. All right. So did I go too ahead? No, there we are. Okay, so when you want to think about becoming an ally, or you're considering what it would mean to be an ally, it's super important to follow the priorities established by Native people and organizations. Now, some of you in the audience are probably Indigenous or Native American. You may be citizens of one of the 574 federally recognized tribes, or citizens of a state-recognized tribe, or you're someone of Indigenous descent. And so many of you, some of you already know this, but for everyone else who is non-Native, it's really important to think about doing a good job of placing your efforts to support Native people and causes. And that means following the priorities that the people themselves have established. One reason that's so important is that there's been historic practices, especially of white people, sometimes white people from within a particular Christian religious denomination, or government officials, or so on, telling tribes that we know what's best for you. We know what you need to do to solve your problems. We know what your problems are. And that's just it's not helpful, it's not healthy, and there are much better ways to go about being a good ally and a good advocate. Simple things include things like supporting Indigenous events that are open to the public. This could mean that your presence in an Indigenous community when there is a public event, I'm not saying to intrude on any sort of private events, sacred ceremonies, not wandering around or trespassing on people's land or their government property or anything. But when there are events open to the public in Indigenous communities, things like tours, celebrations, powwows, film screenings, lectures, concerts, and so on, participate in those and learn from the people that whose land you are visiting, whose community you are visiting. What are the things that they are wanting to highlight about their culture? So powwows, although they came about really in modern day, powwows are sort of a pan-Indian event where people from all different tribes may come and compete in powwow dancing in a competitive way to win prize money and so on. There are always some key elements of a powwow, like the grand entry. When veterans go first, there's deep respect, culturally speaking, deep respect for Indigenous veterans, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. the Native people who are competing in the dancing, or maybe they're not competing, but they're just coming to share some happiness and share some culture and be part of a community that's celebrating its heritage. They're going to be in their finest regalia. They are some of the most beautiful dances and stunning regalia clothing that anyone could wear. So I put a small note here at the bottom that these intercultural experiences can help create understandings between Native and non-Native people and build relationships. You had a great time this year. You'll come back next year. You'll visit the gift shop. You'll go to the restaurant that the tribe is operating. Build relationships, and sometimes these provide income for those hosting. Be respectful and learn the protocol. Some indigenous tribal nations have very strict protocols about taking pictures, taking photographs or video on their property. And so you need to be a good guest and learn what is appropriate. Same goes for speaking with elders. You don't just run up and take somebody's picture because they look beautiful or they look intriguing or interesting or whatever the case might be, or approaching someone as if you have a right to approach them. So elders hold a special significant place in traditional Indigenous society. And so in some cases, there are protocols regarding things like shaking hands, looking someone straight in the eye, and so on. Another consideration is appropriate attire. Okay, so you wear something that is respectful. You're not going out clubbing. You're going to a place where there may be elders and children and people who are very traditional in their spiritual and cultural beliefs. And you don't want to show up as if you want to be the center of attention. Okay, so those are just some things. You can read more online about powwow protocol or just protocol for visiting Native communities. Okay, one of the best sources that I have found and I like to review from time to time is Illuminative. And this is an organization. It's a wholly Indigenous owned, operated organization to help people become good advocates and good allies. So I'm going to click that open in just a moment. But these are some of the elements that I shared with Dr. Clement when I was giving him information about what I wanted to talk about this evening. And so some of the goals of Illuminative as an organization certainly intersect with goals of other Native organizations, with the tribal nations themselves, and so on. So one of those is improve the portrayal of Native Americans in the news and entertainment media. There's a bigger push now, more than ever, to make sure that actors who are portraying Native people actually are Native people. They're not people painting their faces and putting on wigs and trying to look like a Native person, but Native people portraying themselves, which makes sense. Ensuring the respectful inclusion and accuracy of Native American history and cultures in educational curricula. There are some alarming statistics available about the percent of photographs in the typical public school history book that have anything to do with modern day people. Many of them, many of those books that are still used in public schools throughout the country only have references to Native people prior to the year 1900, let's say. So they're 1800s black and white photos or sepia tone photos, if you know what those are. There are references to the Great Plains Wars and things like that, and they don't touch on the fact that Native people are part of the fabric of modern day American society. Okay, so promoting greater inclusion for Native Americans in the development of public policy. So after President Biden was elected in 2020, he appointed Deb Haaland, who was one of the first two Native women to be elected to Congress. He appointed her to become the first Native American Secretary of the Interior, which oversees many important agencies like the National Park Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and so on and so forth. And so having a Native American person, a very capable, brilliant, in my opinion, Native person as a cabinet secretary for the first time led to a lot of important initiatives that engage Native people in decision-making and discussion about important modern day issues. And this past year, I just heard with the election that just ended last Tuesday, there were more Native American candidates on the ballots in the United States this past election than in any previous election in history. And when I stated that over the weekend at an event I was at with a number of Native people, I said, well, of course, not counting prior to 500 years ago when all of the people holding governmental office were Indigenous. Another endeavor is to ensure inclusion and equity within philanthropy that promotes investment in Native communities and supporting solutions that will propel Native communities forward. So let's take a look at this illuminative page. And I told Dr. Clement that I would share my slides with you so that if in the future you want to investigate further, you'll have the proper links and so on. So this is the Illuminative organization. So fighting against Native invisibility and erasure. When I asked my students a couple weeks ago, how many of you can name one Native American actor on television or, streaming programs or movies? Can you think of one? They couldn't think of any. Okay, not one. And the other thing that comes to mind here in terms of erasure and invisibility is so often journalists, authors, and other people have talked about Native people as if they can't speak for themselves, rather than going to Indigenous communities and interviewing people within the community or seeking out Native people who live all over the country. Only about 1/4 of American Indians and Alaska Natives live on reservations. Others live in cities, they live off reservation, they live everywhere. And so it's important that people pay attention to that fact and not marginalize Native people and think all Native people live on reservations. And first of all, not all of the federally recognized tribes have reservations, okay? So if we look at this page, one of the things that I want you to think about is resources. So there's this fight against invisibility and erasure. Here's a guide for addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis in the media. Native women are 10 times more likely to be the victims of violence, including murder and sexual assault, including murder, compared to women from other populations. They are, I believe, 3 times as likely to experience sexual assault in their lifetime. Another endeavor of Illuminative is The Time Is Now, the power of Native representation in entertainment. I touched on that for a moment. Here's a land acknowledgement guide. The Honors College developed a very extensive, thoughtful land acknowledgement a few years back. WVU has adopted one through the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion based on the land acknowledgement that we here in Native American Studies used. What's in and what's out in Native representation. These are all publications that you can download. They're very well done. They're based on research with Native people and others to make sure that these guidelines reflect contemporary thinking. What's the lay of the land? What's the situation? How can we make the situation better? Be a myth buster, okay? Popular culture has created and reinforced many myths about Native communities. And one aspect of the popular culture that has really come under fire, let's say, by many Native groups is mascots, okay? So there have been just willy-nilly lots of so-called Native American mascots. We know that the Washington football team finally got rid of theirs after 40 years or 50 years of protests from Native people. It only worked after FedEx said they were going to take their name. They weren't going to let that team play in FedEx Field. Okay, it took a lot of push. It took money to make that happen. The Cleveland baseball team has changed its name, and many high schools around the country have changed their names as well, out of respect for Native people and in response to scholarship that shows that having so-called Indian mascots objectifies Native peoples. And it simplifies them into some make-believe caricature of a person running around in a headdress and screaming out war whoops and all that kind of thing. Okay, so those are some of the publications that you can use to be a good ally. You can read more about the organization itself, who we are. Unapologetically ambitious, innovative, Native women-led organization grounded in core Native values and community. All right. What is our vision? What is our history? And so on. There are podcasts here that you can look at. American Genocide podcast, okay? Included in genocidal acts that have been carried out by the federal government against Native people in the US is mandatory boarding school attendance for Native children as young as 4 and 5 years old, sending them away to English-only boarding schools, often church-run or church-sponsored boarding schools, where children were not allowed to practice their traditional spiritual beliefs, were not allowed to wear their traditional clothing or hairstyles. They had their hair chopped off upon admission. They were not allowed to go home and see their families. They were not allowed to speak their language. They could be severely punished if they were caught speaking their language. This is really important to understand, okay? So I want you to take a look at that. And you could just kind of look around here. There's all kinds of additional resources, and I'll come back to my slideshow now. But I think Illuminative, because it is so contemporary, because it's Native driven, because it uses research on as its foundation for decision making and determining which endeavors are most important and will achieve results in a certain way. I really like Illuminative. This is a protest. This is a photo from the No DAPL protest, the Dakota Access Pipeline protest, going back to 2017. And many of you are probably aware of that. It was a while ago. You might have been in junior high or grade school, but you may have seen this on the national news. You may have seen films about it in the interim. And this was where a pipeline company was permitted by the Army Corps of Engineers to lay an oil pipeline that would interfere with Indigenous people's water source. So the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe and the Standing Rock Sioux tribe out in the Dakotas, in North and South Dakota. Now, the decision was made to locate it on their land across their waterway, buried underneath their waterway, after the people of Bismarck, North Dakota said, oh, we don't want it here. We don't want it here. That's too dangerous. If it were to burst or leak in some way, it would contaminate our water supply. So no, we refuse, okay? Now, the federal government agencies are supposed to carry out, they have an obligation to carry out prior, and informed consent, meaningful consultation with representatives of the federally recognized tribes before any permits are issued for things like expanding federal highways, permitting cell towers, changing bridges, those kinds of things, and including installing pipelines. So this was a huge protest that brought Indigenous people from around the world to the Dakotas. And one of the reasons that I want to mention this is that there were lots of people, not just Indigenous, but non-Indigenous alike, who flocked to tiny Cannonball, South Dakota on the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation to be a part of this protest. Some of them, I think, were very well intentioned and disapproved of this pipeline and the potential dangers that it could bring to the water supply for the people. But other people, I think, probably just liked a good party, liked a good protest, and just flocked out here. And in some cases, people created real problems. There wasn't enough housing. There wasn't enough bathrooms. There wasn't enough campgrounds. There wasn't enough food. And so people who had kind of in their own agenda, I want to be part of a big movement, I want to be up there at the front of the line, were not being as considered as they could have been. Perhaps their advocacy would have been better placed in fundraising, in supplying food and supplies to the Indigenous protesters, or certainly to at least be at the back of the line so that they were supporting the Native people protesting the pipeline. This was an unprecedented, large-scale, multi-tribal, international protest. So it's from 2017, it's the most powerful protest movement that I've witnessed in my lifetime for Indigenous people in the United States. Okay, so being a good ally, find out what's needed. Maybe your job would be to drive back and forth and deliver cases of water. Maybe your job is not to be up front and make sure you get on TV. Okay, those are important aspects about being a good ally. So I talked a little bit, just briefly, I think, about veterans being the first people to enter a powwow. And a couple weeks ago, I had the chance to meet this gentleman who's one of the Navajo code talkers from World War II. He's 97 years old. His name is Patrick McDonald Jr., and he was only about 16 or 17 when he joined the Marines. And the Navajo code was double coded. The Navajo language had never been written down. So the U.S. military enlisted over 400 Navajo men to serve as code talkers to outsmart the Japanese enemies. Okay, and they were successful, and they helped turn the tide of the war. There was a film written about them called Wind Talkers. Okay, so you can read about it or learn about it in the Hollywood film or watch documentaries or so on. But I want to just spell out a couple of key facts here, do a little myth busting during my talk, and to think about ways that you can think broadly about being an ally. So make yourself aware, make yourself informed. Native Americans serve in the U.S. military at the highest rate of any group in the country, and in particular, Native women serve at the highest rate. As with other people of color who served honorably, Native vets faced discrimination when returning to the U.S. They weren't allowed into VFW and Legion clubs to go have a beer with other vets. Some of them were denied their medals because people held tight to their racist beliefs and did not want to apply full honors to those people who deserved them just because they were Native American. So some resources that you can, we just had Veterans Day yesterday, so I thought perhaps this is on your mind. I will click open this. This is a webpage from the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. This is a terrific resource, the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. They have curriculum materials on here for K through 12 students, excellent resources for teachers in what's called their Project 360. But this is in particular information about Native vets. Okay, so Purple Hearts and other medals and so on. But then later, getting I think they got medals from France and from the allied nations of World War II who were allied with the U.S. But this Navajo Code Talker medal is by act of Congress from 2000. So it took a long time post World War II for Native American veterans to get their due. This is a documentary film by a grad school friend of mine, Patty Lowe, who's an Ojibwe woman from Wisconsin. And you can watch this film as you
PBS
choose.
Wisconsin is lifting up Native American voices and those who are keeping culture vibrant.
There are lots of great materials
to be here today.
Celebrate Native American Heritage Month. Click here to watch more.
All of November is Native American Heritage Month, as designated by the government. We're not going to watch all of this, but I just wanted to hear this first poem by the late Ojibwe poet, Jim.
I was born in war, WW2. Listened as the old men told stories of getting gassed in the trenches, WW1. Saw my uncles come back from Guadalcanal, North Africa, and the Battle of the Bulge. Memorized the war stories my cousins told of Korea. Felt the fear in their voices. Finally, it was my turn. My brothers, too. Joined the Marines in time for the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So you can, if you choose, you can go back and watch that. There's the Native American Warriors Organization. I see, I think I'm running short on time here, so I better hurry up. But I wanted you to be aware.
And sometimes a little bit of conflict has happened.
These are some of the
but
Native
they have
women warriors
risen
who
from
are
that.
wearing jingle dresses and marching in procession at a major gathering. I think maybe at the Denver powwow. So I'm going to scoot along here. So the traumatic legacy of Indian boarding schools. Here's a film that you can watch about that. Just at the Carlisle School alone, which is about 3 hours from here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, there were over 10,000 Native American students sent there from all over, from the Aleutian Islands, from Navajo Nation, from you name it. Sent there as little kids on the train, dropped off, and some never returned. Some died at the boarding school. Some ran away and were lost. Some were murdered. I can't say that some were murdered for sure at Carlisle, but there are documented eyewitness incidents of that happening, children being beaten to death and so on. The National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition is a really important resource. There's an interactive digital map you can look at depending on where you live from around the country or around North America. You can see if there was a historic Indian boarding school near you. This is another really important cause that you could think about if you're looking for a way to be an advocate for Native people. As I mentioned, the murder rate, the number of Native women who go missing, not just Native women actually, but the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives is what it's called here, the MMIWR. This has reached epidemic proportions. We know that there's lots of sex trafficking and human trafficking that goes on around the world. And Indigenous women, women from Indigenous communities have been very vulnerable to this, and children as well. So the National Indigenous Women's Resource is a very important advocacy organization that you should look at. VAWA is a federal act, the Violence Against Women Act, which was amended twice to extend law enforcement capacity to tribal nations, because in the US, there was a very devastating Supreme Court decision called Oliphant, which said that Native law enforcement could not arrest, apprehend, detain, prosecute a non-Native offender. And the vast majority of serial rapists who were committing crimes against Native women were non-Native offenders. So VAWA has begun to address that. Here are some links that you can take a look at to rethink Thanksgiving. That's something that's coming up. You can also click on this link, which is part of the Native American program here at WVU, Native American Studies program. Lots of resources for reading why Native people oppose so-called Indian mascots. There's plenty of scholarship behind the movement to end Indian mascots. And frankly, just because Indigenous people say, this is offensive to me, I wish you would get rid of it, that should be enough. Lots of resources here: the National Congress of American Indians, the Native American Rights Fund, the Native American and Indigenous Studies Association, Indian Country Today Media Network, a link to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the National Museum of the American Indian. You can also support Indigenous authors, filmmakers, and others, restaurants, retailers. There are more and more Native restaurants opening up with really delicious traditional foods. I just bought some wild rice from Red Lake Nation Foods. You might be looking for some nice, unusual Christmas gifts that you can't find at the usual retailers. You can think about tribal colleges and university bookstores. Sometimes the local Native people sell their goods there. Another place would be the Red Cloud Indian School. They have an art gallery and gift shop. And you should be aware of the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Don't buy things that are pretendian, okay? If you want to support Native artisans, there should be a certificate of authenticity that comes with the item you're purchasing that tells who made it, and they will have a license number of something that they're registered as an Indigenous artisan. And that will help you, it'll help prevent you from buying something that maybe was manufactured overseas and just cranked off an assembly line and is being sold to you at a high price, and you're told that it's Native American made and it's not. Okay, so I think this is another, Birch Bark Books is an Indigenous-owned bookstore in Minneapolis. So that's a good place to shop for books. And then there's this poster here, and this is something that you can look up on your own. You can purchase it if you want to. It's available from the Syracuse Cultural Workers, and it has a long list of things that you can do to become an Indigenous ally. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Clement and the Honors College and all of my colleagues in Honors College and all of you students, everyone who is present on the Zoom tonight. So.
All right, Bonnie. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. Now, we got about 12 minutes or so. Let's open up the floor for some questions. So what questions would we have for Bonnie? We can use the I think it's a Q&A. Let's see what question. Now, Bonnie, while we're waiting for questions, you said I was trying to remember the institution that you said you were at, but that's
University of South Dakota.
South Dakota. Okay. So how did you end up here at WVU?
How did I end up here? I was at the University of South Dakota for 2 years, and I decided to leave that institution because there was a lot of instability in the department that I was in.
Okay.
And there was some political infighting. There was a new president at the university. I just felt like it was not a good fit for me. I wanted to be in a department that was more positive and scholarship focused. So I left there and ended up coming to WVU.
And you've been here ever since.
I've been here a long time. I came here initially as a journalism professor, and then
Oh,
later,
wow.
yeah, that was
Oh,
my background. I was a professional journalist. Mhm.
okay. So then how did the link to Native American studies come around?
Well, I'd always been interested in, as a journalist, trying to do a better job, trying to help the mass media do a better job in, fulfill my role of making sure that voices of marginalized people were included in telling their own stories. So it wouldn't be some reporter going and asking some like white majority culture city official, tell me all about that problem with those people, but to speak to people of color themselves, and to also encourage students who come from marginalized communities, or who are students of color who may not see themselves represented as professionals working in the media. I was an advocate for that. So while I was here in the School of Journalism at WVU, I helped establish the first Black Journalists Association in West Virginia. And so that was a real privilege to just be an advocate in that way, that there are many people who should have the right to tell their stories and not have someone else speaking for them. So I hope in my presentation tonight, I've given you a lot of resources that originate with Indigenous people and organizations, so that you can use those. I'm just in a facilitator role, as I see it, to introduce you to those materials and to those people and organizations.
Wow, awesome. And then, still not seeing any questions yet, so we can keep going. Help me understand. I would assume that there wasn't a Native, I don't know this for a fact, but there was not a Native American program at that time when you
Oh,
got here. And
yeah, there was.
oh, there
There,
was. Oh, I'm
uh-huh.
sorry. So,
Yeah,
and
it goes back to the planting of the first peace tree in 1992. It was the
okay,
500-year anniversary of the landing of Columbus. And there was a group of visionaries here at the university and local philanthropists who wanted to ensure that WVU students had the opportunity to learn more about Native America. So we knew at that time, or they knew at that time, that there really wasn't much accurate information in the typical textbooks that people are exposed to from K through 12 education. And they wanted to make sure that people who are leaving WVU with a bachelor's degree had some understanding, could reinforce their knowledge base with accurate information, and be aware that Native people are alive and tribes are still functioning, tribal nations are still functioning. And so we were one of the first programs in our region to have a Native Studies program that grants a minor degree. There are universities that have classes, but not a lot of universities have a program where you can get a major or a minor.
cool. Wow. Well,
Yeah,
thank you for your efforts. Thank you
sure.
for your efforts in that area. Oh man, I'm not seeing any questions here.
Oh,
So I mean,
no. I
well,
hope
no,
I
that's not
bore everyone to
necessarily a
tears.
bad. No, I don't think you bored everyone. I think you probably had such a comprehensive presentation that the questions that would have been asked were probably answered at some point during your presentation. Is how I would look at that. But
Okay, I hope so.
Yep. So let's give folks a few more minutes here, a couple more
Okay.
minutes, and then if we don't have any questions, oh, I see something here. Let's see if this is a question. Do you have any favorite Indigenous activists or actors?
Actors or activists? Okay, well, you know that Lily Gladstone, who is Blackfoot, won the Academy Award this year for her role in the film about the Osage Nation, right? Killers of the Flower Moon, which is based on a book by a Washington Post journalist, David Gran. And so I think she's terrific. I think Lily Gladstone is a very, very talented actor. And then there are lots of others. Adam Beach is a favorite. I've met him in person. Wes Studi is another actor who has had a very long and storied career. I've met him as well. And there's a program that ran recently that was available on Hulu called Reservation Dogs. I wonder how many people in the audience have heard of Reservation Dogs, for short called Res Dogs. It was native produced by Sterling Harjo, directed, written, and the actors, except for the people who are portraying people from other cultures or populations in the series, television series, they're all native. And it's stories told from the perspective of a group of young native high school kids living on a reservation in Oklahoma. And so at times it's really funny, at times it'll bring tears to your eyes. But that's Reservation Dogs. That's a good film that I think you might enjoy as young people, as I presume many in the audience are young people. Another one, there's one called Dark Winds, which is about law enforcement on the Navajo Nation, and it kind of ties in with the Tony Hillerman novels. There is an actor who's quite prominent called Zan McLernan, and he's really talented. He's been in a lot of shows. He was in the Longmire series. He's in Reservation Dogs. He was in Dark Winds, and a really, really talented actor. So those are lots of actors. If the other part of the question was Indigenous activists, there are probably too many to name. It kind of depends on what, whether you're looking at environmental activism or human rights. I mean, environmental concerns are human rights concerns too. Frequently, people need clean water, clean air, that kind of thing. But there are, lots of Indigenous activists. There's a group called Land Back. You can research the Land Back movement. There's a lot of advocacy that takes place out of the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, which is one of those that I linked there. I like what they're doing because it's so comprehensive. And I've had the chance to speak with some of the Native women who have staffed their information tables and so on at conferences that I've been at. But I think that they provide a lot of factual information for people who know nothing about the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people. They also provide resources for people who are looking for lost loved ones that they can't locate. They also provide resources for people who are the victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. So I think that they're a very strong organization, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center.
Wow. Pretty nice comprehensive answer there. You seem
Sure.
to be very much in the know about everything Native American.
Oh, I try to be, but no one can know everything. There's so much complexity and variability, but then there are some key components. I would also have to say that the Native American Rights Fund is probably one of my favorite organizations. It backs Native nations and individuals when they need to go to court. And so the Native American Rights Fund has been behind some of the successful legal suits that have been brought that have set important precedent for Native people. One of those recent cases being the Indian Child Welfare Act, and making sure that challenges to say that the Indian Child Welfare Act is a race-based law and therefore out of alignment with U.S. Civil rights law, that has been thrown out twice now. The Indian Child Welfare Act was brought about because, are you there, Damon?
Yeah. I'm just
Okay.
tying my shoelace. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure you didn't faint or something. Saw you lean over. So the Indian Child Welfare Act was established in 1978 to prevent the unnecessary removal of Indian children from their homes, their families, and their tribes. Prior to 1978, in some communities, almost half the children were being taken away and adopted out into non-Native families where they were never taught anything about their heritage, their true selves, their true families, their true communities. And it was an extension of the genocidal assimilation policies brought about with the boarding school era. So the Indian Child Welfare Act was put into place to protect children who are citizens of federally recognized Native nations here in the U.S., one of those 574 Native nations that's federally recognized, or children who are eligible for citizenship in those tribes. It's not a race-based law, it's a citizenship-based law. The people who are fighting this, unfortunately, are people in the for-profit adoption industry. They put up the money to wage these legal challenges. So very unfortunate.
All righty. Well, that was very informative there. I did not know
Good,
that. But
good.
we have come to 7 o'clock. So I want to say we appreciate the
Okay.
opportunity to visit with you this evening.
Thank you.
Attendees, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Bonnie Brown at bonnie.m.brown@mail.wvu.edu. An archived version of this webinar will be available later on the Honors College website. Thank you for spending this time with us, and have a good evening, everybody. Bonnie, once again, thank you so very much.
Could I
This
just
was
mention
awesome.
one thing? Thank
Yep.
you. Next Tuesday night, we are co-hosting with Landscape Architecture a beautiful film screening called From Earth to Sky. And the link for that is on our website. You can come in person to 1021 South Ag Sciences Building. And there will be a panel of 3 Indigenous designers and community planners who will be discussing the importance of Indigenous voices in landscape and architecture. The film itself is called From Earth to Sky. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous film that focuses on 7 Indigenous architects from North America who have built and designed some of the most beautiful structures ever. And it's a very poignant film. So that's next Tuesday night, the 19th, from 5 to 7:30 in the South Ag Sciences Building, room 1021, or you can register to watch virtually. If you want to sit at home in your jammies and eat ice cream and watch, you can do that. So go to the Native American Studies website and you'll see the link to join virtually or the details of who is speaking and everything. Thanks for letting me put that plug in.
Oh, not a problem at all. Well, Bonnie, you have a very nice evening, and thank you again for your time. Everyone have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.